Hi, I'm Amanda Roberts, and I am the producer, director, and co-creator of Beyond the Scale. I want to emphasize that we will not be glorifying eating disorders in any way.
We will not be mentioning specific numbers such as weight and calorie intake. We will also not be showing any pictures of me in my eating disorder. That information can be really triggering to people recovering from eating disorders, and it adds to the glorification of them.
We will be explaining what eating disorders are and also Katin's specific journey with her eating disorder, Anorexia Nervosa. There are many different types of eating disorders, and it varies from person to person. I hope you all take something away from this documentary, and please enjoy Beyond the Scale.
My original goal weight I had for myself was so many dozens of pounds behind me, and it didn't matter anymore. I just had to keep losing weight, and it never occurred to me that I was killing myself. My name's Katin Sarner. I'm a daughter, a friend, a sister, a writer, a singer, and a recovering anorexic. Everything started when I was 13 years old and I lost my grandfather to cancer, and then my grandmother on the other side of the family 3 months later, and then 10 days after her, my great aunt. And I think for a 13-year-old girl in the 7th grade, it's really hard to lose that many family members in such a short amount of time.
I know Katin through school. We met for the first time in our 6th grade history class, and we pretty much hit it off right away. We became pretty good friends, and then we just kept getting closer and closer, and she is now one of the closest people to me and my best friend.
Katin and I met in the 6th grade when we were both in our middle school's musical, and we've just been besties ever since.
My name is Kelly Souza. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and I work in residential, partial hospitalization, and intensive outpatient eating disorder treatment. I cover kind of all spectrums of care for the state of California for our company, Montanito and Affiliates. And I know Katin, she was a client of ours a couple of years ago, and I was blessed enough to be part of her journey and her process on her road to recovery.
I met Katin in the 7th grade. Katin in middle school, she was a really happy person, and she's just so kind, and she's always willing to help her friends and just other people in general.
I met Katin in 6th grade. In middle school, Katin was the most hardworking, generous, funny, kind, intelligent, and driven girl I knew.
I never expected her to have an eating disorder.
After my grandpa died, I just completely lost my appetite. I was in the middle of this big musical theater production, and I was dancing and I was moving, and I had to be someone else than I was on stage. And my only way of coping was just not eating. And over that entire year, I just kind of deteriorated. I didn't really know what I was doing to myself, but once I stepped on the scale at the doctor's office, she had said, what's going on? You lost so much weight. I didn't even realize it until then. People started telling me that I looked sick, or that they would even congratulate me, oh my gosh, look at you, you lost so much weight. And it really just enforced that mindset that losing weight is good, and I was always a good girl and I followed rules, and I prided myself on that. And then to have people just telling you that you're better because you lost that weight, it just spiraled from there.
She began to change in the 8th grade, I would say. She started comparing herself to other girls. She was more angry at things, and she was just not the outgoing person I was used to. And I didn't recognize my best friend.
During my 8th grade year, I was 14. That was definitely the precursor to everything. It seemed as though all other areas of my life were perfect. I got perfect grades. I was on an all-star volleyball team that season. I had the perfect friends. Everybody liked me. There was no drama. I had this role in this musical that I loved, and I realized that the only part of my life I felt that wasn't perfect was my body. In middle school, it started to hit me that like boys like those girls who are skinny and have small waists, and I would just be so much more attractive, and all areas of my life would be perfect if I was skinny.
When the eating disorders started to take over, and I wasn't keenly aware of it, I noticed that that's the part of her that changed the most. She became a lot like a depressed individual, but it wasn't that obvious. She was, like I said, just less social, a little more despondent. She never closed the door to her room until now, and secretive. That was the one red flag that went up with my intuition, but I did not connect it to an eating disorder.
The day I left for my 8th grade class's trip to the East Coast, we were going to like Washington, D.C. and New York, and it was this big experience that everybody was looking forward to. And it was that day that I stepped on the bus that it went from disordered eating and obsession with diet culture to an eating disorder.
She returned from that trip noticeably thinner. I mean, to the point where I was worried.
When we got back, I remember weighing myself and realizing that I had lost weight on a 9-day trip and just being thrilled. And I remember thinking, like, I can do that. I am strong enough and I'm powerful enough to change my body just by simply not eating. And it just took off from there. By the time mid-July came around, I had gotten into this pattern. It was almost like a game with myself, where it'd be like, how long can I go without eating? How much weight can I lose this week? It was just like a constant board game of my mind fighting against my body. And I was training really hard for volleyball tryouts that were coming up at the beginning of the school year. And this is when like exercise addiction came into play, where I would have, volleyball practice or training for volleyball for like 4 or 5 hours in the morning. And then I would come home and I ran. And I'm not a runner. I confidently can say that I hate running, but I would just take off and I would run and I wouldn't let myself stop. It was like, it was as if I felt like I was not in my body and I couldn't control the urge to run and do sit-ups and push-ups. And I would just keep going until my vision turned black. And then I would come home and I would keep doing sit-ups in my bed. It was just, I could not stop. And I had no food fueling that. I had started ordering these like weird no-calorie foods online that who knows what was in those things. Like, they were not approved by the FDA. I was just putting weird stuff into my body because I thought it would make me lose weight. But the thing is, I had no idea. I had no previous education that what I was doing was not okay. Everybody, just society telling me, and everybody for that matter, that like eating less food is good, eating less calorie food is good. And I felt like I was being a good girl and following all these rules society had created for us. And I had no idea what I was doing was damaging my organs, for that matter.
I remember a sign of her eating disorder when I went surfing with her the summer before our 9th grade year. And she was really thin, but she was thin for most of that year, so I thought that was just her body type, when really she lost so much weight across that whole year, and it just didn't really ring any bells to me when it should have. And I was just so wrong, and I didn't know anything about eating disorders at that time.
Her first week at Penn, Katin was definitely different. And it was very obvious to me right away. When Katin put her phone number in my phone, she put her contact down as Katin the Laugher, Katin Sarner. And her entire first week of Penn, I did not see her laugh once. She didn't laugh. She wasn't even really smiling. I expected her to be all over the campus all the time, trying to get to know all of the teachers, trying to get to know everyone in the office, because she was always on ASB at Miralest. And she was just very subdued. She was very quiet. She was very shy and like scared, which she never was.
At that point, I had completely stopped eating for the most part, and it just turned into like, I could almost like feel my body shutting down. It was the scariest feeling I've ever felt, of still having no idea what I was doing, or why I was feeling like that, but I just remember thinking like, something bad is gonna happen to me. Like, when does this end? But I didn't know, and I frankly didn't care either. I just knew that I was losing weight, and that's the only thing I wanted, and I knew I couldn't stop. My original like goal weight I had for myself was so many dozens of pounds behind me, and it didn't matter anymore. I just had to keep losing weight, and it never occurred to me that I was killing myself. One day I was sitting in 4th period Algebra 1, that freshman year. I was drinking some weird 0-calorie flavored water thing. And this thought occurred to me that was like, something is seriously wrong. Like, why? Hunger had already passed. I wasn't feeling hungry anymore, but I felt like I could not physically get myself to eat, and it was this terrifying, out of control feeling where I was like, something is wrong. I don't know what it is. I don't know what I have, but I think it might be an eating disorder. And the only reason I knew that was because I was online just like looking up things like, what does it mean when you can't feed yourself, when you feel like your mind is stronger than your body and you want to eat but you can't, or you just keep wanting to lose weight even though you know you're probably too thin. And if it hadn't been for the internet, I don't know what I would have thought. And I went to my friend Zoe that day at lunch, and I remember looking at her and I'm like, something's wrong. And she was just like, you think? Like, obviously something's wrong, Katin.
The day that Katin came to me to ask for help was actually our second day of high school. It was our first lunch at Penn, and she pulled me aside and she said, I have to tell you something that I have literally not told anyone else, not even my mom, but I took a quiz online last night and I think that I have an eating disorder.
She was just like, if you don't tell your mom that you haven't been eating for the past month, then I'll call her up and tell her myself, and I'm giving you 12 hours to tell her. And I couldn't believe it, but I told my mom that I thought I had an eating disorder. She didn't really know how to respond at the time. I think she was just really scared and was in shock as well. And Zoe saved my life. There's no doubt about it that Zoe O'Neill saved my life, because the doctor said if I had gone a few more weeks, I could have very well had a heart attack and died. And I just thank Zoe every day, because without her, I wouldn't be sitting here right now, and I probably would have died without anybody knowing why.
She came to me scared. She told me that something had happened to her. She informed me that she thought she had something called an eating disorder and that she was very worried and she wanted it to go away. She even asked me if we could go to the doctor the next day to get rid of it. That's how unaware she was of what she was doing, and that's how unaware I was. She wasn't educated on it, and more importantly, unaware that I didn't even know that she was as thin as her friends were seeing her. The next day, I called our pediatrician, And that person immediately directed me to a specialist in the area.
I was diagnosed with an eating disorder and sent to the hospital within the same 20-minute doctor's appointment. My mom had taken me out of school early. I was already missing school because I couldn't get up in the morning. I was too weak, or I would see black spots at school and have to go home. But this day she picked me up early from school. We had gone to this eating disorder specialist that my pediatrician, Dr. Tiffany Becker, had recommended. Her name is Linda Shack, and we walked up to her office. I didn't really know what was going on. I just figured she'd say, like, eat a little more, and that would be it. But she took my vitals, she took my weight, she brought my mom and I into her office, and she looked at me and she was like, yep, that's an eating disorder. And a few seconds later, she was just like, how would you feel if I told you you had to go to the hospital? And my heart just dropped. And I remember just saying, that doesn't make sense, but I wouldn't want to go. But if you're a doctor, I guess I should believe you. I remember saying that. And she just said, I think I need to admit you to the hospital because your heart rate is low. I was bradycardic. I had serious orthostatic hypertension. And she was like, it's dangerous for you to be walking around right now, this compromised. So just like that, I walked across the street with her assistant and I admitted the hospital in the pediatric unit of Torrance Memorial. And I was there for 14 miserable days. And it was, I really don't remember. I was just kind of distant.
This was beyond my control of being able to mother my daughter. This was beyond my husband's control. It was beyond the doctor's control to help her. It was up to my daughter. And not that I didn't have confidence in her. I have all the confidence in the world. But to leave a child with the choice of whether or not she wants to live or die, to leave them with that decision seemed counterintuitive. And that made me mad. That made me mad at the disorder. For some time, it made me angry with her that she didn't want to choose life.
When Katin told me that she had an eating disorder, she kind of just threw it at me. And I understand that because it was lunchtime and the bell rang for us to get to our 5th period. And she had found me and she said, hey Annalise, I know that you noticed that I haven't been myself lately, and I just wanted to tell you that I have anorexia. And I asked her what that was because I didn't know what it was. And she told me it was an eating disorder and that she couldn't eat. I said one of the worst things that I probably could have said to her at that moment. And I just kind of told her, well, just eat. And I didn't know what that would mean to her because I wasn't in her shoes and I didn't know what this eating disorder was about. And she kind of just looked at me and didn't say anything. And then I told her that I had to go to my 5th period class because I would have been tardy, and I said, hey, maybe you can explain this to me over the phone or in person after school later so I can understand because I still didn't get it. And after that, I didn't see her. I got a text from her saying that she was in the hospital for this eating disorder and that they would be trying to keep us updated on the process and give us more information about this eating disorder and what it does to a person. And I went to go visit her in the hospital that day that I got the text. The explanation of it was not that clear still in my head. Like, I understood it a little better, but it still wasn't like really in there. And I feel like as she's gone through this whole journey, it's become a lot clearer.
When Katin told me she thought she had an eating disorder, I was really concerned and also confused. I was uneducated and I didn't know that eating disorders can lead to death. And looking back on when she told me, I just wish I was more educated by my school, because if I did, and if possibly Katin was more educated, she could have maybe prevented her eating disorder at an early stage, but we'll never know. And I just wish I knew more during that period of time.
I was diagnosed with anorexia on September 13th, 2017, 10 days after I turned 15. The months leading up to that were by far the most miserable months of my life, and honestly, about 3 weeks leading up to that day, I don't really even remember anything. I was too sick and too malnourished to comprehend what I was doing to myself and what was happening to me.
I noticed a few things here and there by the way Katin was talking about herself and bringing herself down, but I was still in deep shock when Katin texted me and a few others about what she was going through and what her current situation was.
In total, from September 13, 2017 to March of 2019, I was in treatment, in and out of residential treatment, which is basically like a home with 5 other girls with eating disorders, boys as well. Sometimes it depended on the program I was in, and sometimes adults, and it's basically just like 24-hour therapy with nurses on staff. We ate together, we cried together, we laughed together, and I mean, some of my best friendships were formed from that experience, actually. But I went to treatment a lot of times. It took a while for it to really stick with me that I couldn't keep doing that to myself. My 3rd treatment mission was probably the worst. I kind of just gave up. I had been in the hospital for the 3rd time, and I was discharging the hospital to go to a residential facility I had already been at before one other time. I just remember getting there and just completely giving up. I refused my meals. I just told the dietitian, I'm not doing this. I told my therapist and everybody, I was like, this is too hard. And for the first time, I remember saying, I would rather restrict until I die rather than recover and gain weight. That was it's a scary thing to almost accept death. I was 15 and just like, yeah, I'm okay with dying of this. Like, it's too hard, I give up, and I don't want to recover, and I just want to starve myself to death. It was terrifying.
Seeing Katin go through many eating disorder facilities was really hard. She wrote letters to me expressing that she didn't want to be at the facilities, and made me sad that she didn't want to confront her eating disorder, but I also understand that certain facilities were not meeting up with her healing process.
Watching Katin go through treatment for this eating disorder made me feel really bad because I didn't know what I could do as a friend to try and help her. You know, I myself don't know anything about this eating disorder, and it was a lot of new information for me to try to understand what she was going through. I visited her in the hospital quite a lot, and I also received letters from her when she had moved to different places. And I would write back to her, and it brought me joy that we could still communicate throughout this process of her on her road to recovery. But at the same time, I felt really bad because I didn't want her to have to go through this. She went from being a freshman in high school to being an adult practically in the blink of an eye.
Seeing one of my friends go through something so brutal was really hard. It was really strange not being able to see or talk to her every day. But I remember the first time I visited her in the hospital, she looked so happy, and she got up and gave me a mini tour of her room and her books and all the art that she completed.
Residential treatment is awful. It is just facing your biggest fear 6 times a day when you sit at that table. You know, individual therapy sessions, group therapy sessions, nutrition groups. Sometimes we would cook, but just food, facing that fear and having to sit with that and process the emotions and feelings of what it's like to have just completed a meal that is sufficient enough for your body, when so many of us there we're not used to that anymore. Our new normal was foods that were not fueling our body, or amounts of food that weren't fueling our body, and then to go somewhere where all of a sudden you're retraining your mind and your body to be fed is crazy. It's going back to the basics of childhood, like when you're a baby and you cry when you're hungry and, you know, you stop when you're full. You just have to go back to those instincts. It's terrifying to be able to really trust your body again. When you know that you can trust your body again, when your hunger and fullness cues are back, it's the most magical feeling to have that trust within yourself. In May of 2018, my parents made the wise decision to transfer me to Clementine Malibu Lake. It changed everything. I went from being depressed, I had serious depression, so anxious about food, overall just giving up on treatment, on recovery, on everything, to being actually inspired to get better, and to get better for myself, not for those around me. For the first time, I met recovered people. I met a therapist that had gone to the exact same residential treatment center that I had, and it was just the most inspiring thing to see these women who went through what I was going through right then and have this like amazing healthy relationship with food, with their bodies, and have come back to work in a treatment center that I was at right that moment. I was so inspired to start making the right decisions and to really just get my life back on track and recover.
So it's been really exciting to see Katin go through her journey of recovery. My first interaction was actually with her mom. It was a Saturday afternoon. I got a call from admissions and they said, hey, I know you're not working, but are you able to talk to a mom? She is really desperate to get her kid moved over to Clementine. And I said, yeah, of course. I'm a mom, so I feel like moms are my specialty. I understand how difficult this is from a mother's perspective. I don't have a child with an eating disorder, but I do have a child, so I understand how you just protect with all your might with your children. So I got on the phone with her mom, and you could just hear just the fear in her voice, and I just immediately felt her in my heart, like, oh, I gotta help her get her kid in. So long story short, we got Katin moved over to our adolescent residential program, and she'd been in treatment. She tried different things, and it just hadn't been successful, and that's very, very common with eating disorder treatment. Most people come through systems 3 or 4 times, go through multiple systems. It's really hard with adolescents too, in that they don't voluntarily usually choose to go to treatment. You have parents who are forcing the hand, or saying, I'm not gonna watch you die, you're gonna go to treatment. Thing with treatment though is until it's an internally motivated decision, it doesn't really matter what we say or do as providers, what a parent wants for their child. A kid is gonna do what a kid is gonna do.
When she finally found her healing facility that spoke to her, I noticed that she was just becoming a different Katin that was more positive and just more in tune with herself. And I was just so happy to see that she was healing and recovering.
Hi, I'm Bella. I was in treatment at Clementine Residential with Katin. Katin was amazing to be in treatment with because she is just one of the kindest, sweetest people you will ever meet. Even on her hardest days, she can brighten up somebody else's. She's great at giving pep talks and cheering people up, and that was needed in treatment because the days were hard, the days were sad, and you didn't want to have fun. You wanted to cry, but you had to make it better so that you could survive it. And she did for me, and I hope I did for her. Katin, compared to the first day to the last day, well, Katin was very scared on the first day, just like we all are. She was coming from another home. You're not sure who's gonna be there or if they're gonna be recovery oriented. So it's scary, but she was still the kind, sweet, amazing person that she always has been. And on her last day, she was a lot stronger. She knew a lot more. She was ready to face this eating disorder a lot more. She was more recovery oriented. She was wanting to reclaim her life, wanting to get it back, wanting to be happy again. And I think that's amazing. And I think Katin is one of the strongest people, and I'm so lucky to have met her.
I remember the day that recovery finally seemed achievable, that it wasn't this big, terrifying fantasy that would never come true. I think for the first time I was truly inspired to recover for real. It was in August of 2018, and there were only 3 of us in the house at that time. It was really slow. One of the therapists at Clementine, Danielle Hoffman, was there that night to have dinner with us. It was this big pizza challenge that we had every Sunday, and we asked her, can you just tell us your story? Like, how did you recover? And we all sat down in this circle and we talked for, it must have been hours. I think she stayed overtime. And she just told us basically that she went to treatment and she was just like us, but she did it and it was really hard and it sucked and it was scary, but she overcame it. There she is. She was just sitting right in front of us, recovered and free from her eating disorder, and she didn't have those thoughts anymore. She didn't have the overwhelming feelings of not feeling comfortable in my own skin and feeling unworthy because of my size. She'd gone through that and she was sitting there and she didn't think like that anymore. And it was just the most eye-opening, inspiring experience of my life to be like, that can be me one day.
Katin worked so hard. I don't know that I've seen a client work so hard on everything from her relationships to her relationship with food, relationship with her mom, with her entire family. There were a lot of different things that came up for her. You know, eating disorders are incredibly complex. It's never just about the food. It's actually not about the food. You're looking at depression, anxiety, trauma. There are a lot of underlying factors that until those things are worked through and teased out, the food isn't going to get better. The food is the way that we control. The food is the way that we communicate by either eating too much of it, not eating enough of it, getting rid of it, all of the different things we do with the food. A lot of times we'll mimic kind of what's going on in our life and what's going on in our relationships. And so she did the work. She dug in. She had the hard sessions. She had the hard conversations. She confronted a lot of things and got herself to a place where she was able to understand kind of what was going on for her, how she was coping, how she wanted to cope, what she wanted her life to be. And I think the turning point for her, which is crucial in recovery, is something has to be bigger than the eating disorder. And I think she found a life that she wanted to live, and she found things that were worth living for.
Today is December 18th, 2019, and in terms of my recovery, it's been going pretty good. There's not a lot of like huge peaks or valleys anymore, I've noticed, since I've been out of treatment for almost a year. But it's still really hard. It's really hard, but it's still a fight at the table, and when I get anxious, it's really hard for me to eat, and it's really hard to see my body and deal with being in my body, but it's going the best it ever has, and that's all I could ever hope for. So I'm proud of myself, and every day is still a struggle, but I know it'll be worth it in the end.
It is December 30th, 2019, and I'm actually in Thailand right now on a family vacation, which is pretty epic, but the food is pretty hard to eat because it's a whole bunch of food that I've never had before, and I don't know the calories in it, which is really frightening, but I also know, looking at my plate, how much I need to eat, and I've been doing that. I also had some really awesome coconut ice cream from a coconut, which was pretty good, and I'm proud of myself for having that. But traveling for me has always been a struggle when it comes to my eating disorder, and that's really how it kind of started, was a long vacation of not eating. But this time I am eating, and it's going strong. It's hard being in my bathing suit every day and having to deal with my body and my struggles, but other than that, it's a really awesome trip, and I'm excited to go into 2020 strong. 2019 was a hell of a year, but it was also the year I discharged my last treatment center. Forever. So no more treatment in 2020.
I've loved writing since middle school. English was my favorite subject in middle school, and of course now too. But it wasn't until I started writing about my eating disorder that I realized that writing wasn't only something I did for fun. It was something that I needed to do to release, just to get my words out onto a piece of paper and get everything just out of my system is something so essential in my life. And I was always so secretive about my writing about my eating disorder, and I never really shared it with anybody until my sophomore year of high school. I had just started high school for the first time since treatment, and I had written this big, long, it was like 10,000 words about my eating disorder and going through what I did, and I decided to share it with my teacher that year, my English teacher that year, Miss Valier, and to finally share something that I consider like the most vulnerable thing I had ever written and the most raw, unedited version of myself with somebody, and get such a welcoming, caring, loving response to it was amazing.
My name is Emily Ballier, and I'm the English Department Chair at Rolling Hills Prep and Renaissance Schools. And I first met Katin when she enrolled at RHP in her sophomore year, and she enrolled in my Honors English 2 class. I think writing helps people heal in at least 3 ways. One, there's the act of catharsis, where you are working through those emotions and that trauma and whatever horrible experience you went through, and you're able to look at it maybe more clinically, and you go, okay, would I use the word horrible or dreadful or awful? And you're thinking it through in a way that lets you, yes, you're reliving it because you're writing it, but you're also putting your own spin on it, which leads it to my reason number 2 that I think writing can help you recover, and that it's your story now. You're reclaiming it. Usually trauma is something terrible that happens to you, but when you're writing it, you're owning it and you're telling your version of it. So now it's yours, and you can at least take some ownership of that fact and try to become more powerful than whatever trauma has been inflicted upon you. And then thirdly, I think it's also really helpful when you write, you try to share your words with the world, and others can find comfort in them and try to use and look at what you've gone through and learn from you. And you can be like, hey, I'm here to help you. And there's something really nice about knowing that your horrible experience, your trauma, can help others.
To start writing more and start submitting my writing to literary magazines and to competitions, and to win some of them, and to be included in works of literature was so amazing that people were reading my story and it wasn't this big secret anymore.
On Wednesday, September 13th, 2017, at 3:30 p.m., I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. At 3:31 p.m., I was rushed to the hospital as I had destroyed what was left of my once healthy body out of the pure desire to be thin.
Katin has definitely grown as a writer. When she first started sharing her experiences with me, she used a lot of metaphors, and they were beautiful metaphors, but it wasn't very specific. And then as she grew as a writer and wrote more and more about it and processed her trauma more and more, she started to use really explicit, poignant, cutting language that, you know, you felt like you were there. She was opening her guts and you could see the blood and all the insides, and it was gruesome, but it was also gorgeous because her writing, I don't really have words for it. It was it's beautiful and it's haunting, and I remember reading one of her pieces and crying and just being so moved by her bravery and her willingness to share her story with others in a way to try to help them, as well as processing her own grief and sorrow about what had happened to her and what she was going through. And I think that's really helped her heal through this process, because she no longer just is a victim, right, with this just happening to her over and over again. She's taking her story and she's using it to reclaim some power and to say, this happened to me, but it is not all of me. Here's my spin on it. I'm going to take this and I'm going to build something beautiful, yes, grotesque, but also beautiful out of it. And I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to share these stories with the world, and others can take comfort and maybe become empowered to do something and to not just sit back and, well, you know, fade away.
It is January 25th, 2020, and it has been quite the week, to say the least. I had to move schools because for my mental well-being, I decided to remove myself from my old high school. And in the middle of all of that, a few days after I left, my beautiful, amazing friend from treatment from Clementine, Annabelle Umazo, and we launched our nonprofit organization, The Fight Behind Our Forks, and it was so scary. Like, I'm not gonna pretend it was everything I could have ever, hoped for. I mean, it was hard, it was scary, and I realized that now I can't relapse because I can't be a hypocrite, because we went to this middle school, my old middle school, and we told all these wonderful girls about our eating disorders, and I told them how mine started in middle school, at that very middle school, and it was freaking crazy and terrifying. But all I can hope for is that one of those students connected to it, and maybe it could have stopped something from happening to them. So that's all I could hope for, but it was quite a week. Bella and I had the idea to start The Fight Behind Our Forks, honestly, when we were in treatment. Actually, I remember we were sitting in a group one day, and we were just like, you know what, there's needs to be more education about this in schools, but also there's never anybody who we could talk to that's like in the middle of recovery. The first time we went to a middle school, and it happened to be my middle school that I had went to, and to have these girls come up to us afterwards and just be like, thank you, this is what I needed, was everything. Everything just seemed worth it all of a sudden, and just my heart just melted, and I knew that this is what we need to do. Singing is my everything. I've been singing since I can remember, and it's just been such an essential part of my life. I started voice lessons when I was in the 5th grade, and it just took off, and I started, doing theater with it. There was just this feeling that I feel when I'm on stage that is just eccentric. But when I was in my eating disorder, I quit singing. I remember in treatment, people would be like, we heard you sing, we heard you like musical theater, can you sing us something? And I would just be like, no, I'm not singing ever again. Looking back, I think I was really terrified of my body doing something I enjoyed or creating something that brought other people joy. It was really scary to think that my body can do something that I don't hate. And the first time I sang after treatment is at my synagogue with one of my best friends, Jordan Davidson. and we sang this song, and I just remember thinking, like, this is it. Like, this is what I want to do forever. I can't believe I thought I was going to give this up because I was so scared of being vulnerable in front of a crowd, or just so scared of people judging how I looked.
I met Katin a while back at Temple Bethel in our Torah school. She's always been one of my best friends, and I'm so glad I met her.
I remember Katin was always such a big singer, and she just loved to sing in middle school, but I remember that went away during her eating disorder period, and now she's just so big on singing. She's singing opera and just all these amazing things, and it's just so cool to see Katin gain passion into what she's doing again, and it's just been so great seeing Katin go from where she was to where she is now.
Being vulnerable in front of a crowd, or just so scared of people judging how I looked, or people telling me I wasn't good enough, and just letting loose and having fun on that stage and doing what I feel like I was made to do was just a wonderful feeling. And yeah, I think it's been something, especially the past year when I got into classical voice and more opera style. It's been something I could count on no matter what. When I'm frustrated, when I'm sad, when I'm happy, it's just I could filter all of that energy into music instead of harming my own body and punishing myself through not eating. And to be able to just sing at the top of my lungs and share my voice with the world is something I want to do the rest of my life.
So mental health treatment has been significantly impacted by COVID, which is no surprise, I'm sure, to anybody, but I'm not sure that anybody fully understands the extent to the impact that we've felt in the mental health field. I will tell you specifically for eating disorders, so much of the work we try to accomplish is in direct conflict with what we're trying to do with COVID. So a lot of our clients have co-occurring OCD, co-occurring depression, co-occurring anxiety, and basically what we're telling our OCD clients is, we're trying to expose them, do exposure response prevention with hand washing, things like that, and now we're saying wash your hands every 20 seconds. So all the work that we've done to get them away from that is now what they're being told to do by society. Being paranoid about foods and where it comes from, that's another issue a lot of our clients have. Yet everybody's saying you should be paranoid about your grocery bags and you should wipe them down when they come inside your house. All of our clients who struggle with isolation, they've been isolated. We're trying to get them out, get them to interact, get them to have relationships. COVID says stay in your house, don't talk to anybody, don't see anybody. It's all of the things that impact our clients significantly on a daily basis are just compounded times like 1,000 with COVID.
So today I was in our garage looking through some boxes and I found this scrapbook from the summer of 2018, and it is this thing I put all of my letters in and all of some memories from treatment in. And I found this one page that has a letter unopened that says sealed on June 2nd, 2018 to be opened on June 2nd, 2020. So I forgot that I wrote this, but it's July 2020, so I'm a little late, but I thought that was a great time to open it. So let's see what it says. Dear future Katin, I have some hopes and dreams for you going into your senior year of high school. And I'm going into my senior year of high school right now. Right now, I'm in a treatment center for anorexia at Clementine Malibu Lake, as you already know. I'm struggling with my body changing as I gain the weight necessary to recover, but I am making progress. I hope you're applying to colleges fully recovered, ready to become a teacher. UCLA? Hopefully. Or are you still at Peninsula or Rolling Hills Prep? As I am planning to attend there for my sophomore year, which I did. Keep going, girl. I hope you're recovered or at least almost there. Love you, Katin, XOXO. Well, I'm not fully recovered, but this is pretty spot on, I'd say. I'm applying for colleges. I'm at Peninsula, and yeah, I'm applying to UCLA. So that's really awesome. So today I was going through some boxes in our garage and I came across this, which was my first ever journal when I was first diagnosed. And funny enough, Amanda actually gave this journal to me the first time she visited the hospital the day after I got there. And she and her mom told me that they think I should start writing down my experience and what I was feeling, and I did, and that helped me so much. And I thought it would be important for me to share my first ever journal entry. And this was really before I knew anything about eating disorders, before I really understood my diagnosis. And I think it's really interesting just to read the raw things I was thinking. So, September 16th, 2017, 9 a.m. Today is my 4th day in the hospital. There have been tons of doctors in and out of my room 416, and I'm just really tired. They said my heart rate is super low and my blood pressure is low too. Lots of my friends have visited already, Cheska, Amanda, Annalise. It's kind of awkward when people visit because I know they want to ask, why did you do this to yourself? But I can't explain it to them. I've already had to talk to so many doctors and I really don't know how or why I did this to myself. I don't even think it was my choice to end up like this. I feel like this wasn't and still isn't me at all. Yes, I may have started this, but then my mind took over and it was no longer me choosing not to eat. It was like someone rewired my brain. I'm not in control of my mind, even though I'm not in control of my body. I really do feel embarrassed though. I feel embarrassed that I let myself end up like this. But then again, it wasn't really me who got myself here. The problem is, people don't get that. I'm worried that when I go back to school, people will judge me. She's the selfish girl who didn't eat to get skinny. I just want people to know that it's not a choice to have an eating disorder. Before I really understood anorexia, I thought people who had it were so self-centered and disgusting. I wish someone could have really explained it to me, the mental part of it. Maybe one day I'll get to teach people about this. I think it's really interesting that was really before I understood a lot about myself and about my eating disorder, and it's also true, and it's amazing that I get to teach stuff about eating disorders to people right now, and I am glad to say that this was almost 3 years ago, and I'm far from the girl who was writing this, and I just have so much compassion for myself, and I wish this girl knew that everything would be okay, because it did.
I don't want to say, I would not say that I saved Katin's life. Katin saved her own life. I will never take credit and say that it was me. She likes to try to tell me that I did. I do not think that I did. I think that I am very grateful to have been in a situation where I could help her. And I'm so honored that she felt comfortable enough to tell me. And I am very grateful that I had a clear head and did the right thing by having her tell her mom. But I will never take credit for the journey that Katin went through herself. That was her. She saved her own life. She made the decision to get better and to fight, and she did.
What I want you all to take away from this is to understand what an eating disorder is.
People need to be aware of how common it is. 50% of Americans either have had an eating disorder themselves or know somebody with an eating disorder. So 50% of Americans are connected in some way to this community. And 30 million Americans have an eating disorder right now, whether that be anorexia, bulimia, EDNOS, binge eating disorder, any of them. It's so common, yet there's no education on it in schools. There's no education growing up.
Eating disorders need to be talked about. We all have the power to educate ourselves, and if we do, that will better our society, and it will help people understand what eating disorders are, and eating disorders should not be kept a secret.
Thank you.